least the 1 month rent detained should help the landlord to fix the place.
Okay. So Ebenezer says, his landlord is giving him 3 months, even though his contract is, his rent is ended, and the landlord says after the 3 months he doesn't want to see him near or around the house, and he wants to know if that's legal, whether the landlord can tell him that.
Well, the landlord can serve notice that if you are not renewing or landlord is not willing to renew, give up vacant possession at the end of your term, not 1 hour more. That is fine. But in the light of what has just happened, the way Ebenezer said it, that the landlord said he didn't want to see him anywhere around the premises. It does sound a bit threatening, but it also depends on the conduct of the parties through the tenancy. If you are good to each other, you are nice to each other, these harsh letters will not be flowing. And usually when people report others, they don't tell you they are part of their own contribution to the state of affairs, But he says he's not renewing. Just, find a place on or before the expiry, hand over vacant possession.
Let me get Mr. Chumanpofo's, views on this. So the landlord says, I don't want to see you around the house at all.
In fact, it's a tenancy agreement edition. So once you have an agreement with the tenant, the law states it clear under Section 17H that after the lease, and you need to recover possession for a purpose, whether for your personal use, family, or whatever, serve notice to quit. But what I've realized is that landlords, at times, some of them serve the notice within the period of the agreement. But when you do that, it doesn't sound what the Act is demanding. The Act is saying that serve the notice after the lease. So, for instance, when your time is up, maybe next week or end of this month, the notice can be forwarded to you maybe the next day. And it's supposed to be 1 month going, 1 month to 3 months. That's supposed to be. But at the end of the day, the notice given to the tenant is not an order. However, you have to prepare the tenant's mind to look for an alternative accommodation. But you are not the one to give an order to the tenant that you are to move today or tomorrow. But when you come to rent control, we'll still have to ask whether you have served notice on that very tenant. Then at the end of the day, when we find that things are, or the fundamental things are in place, we'll quickly go into the matter and find out what to do. Then we give our ruling.
Okay.
Then the ruling, the officers or the rent officer have to give time, date that the tenant should move. After the tenant have violated the law, we make reference to court for enforcement. So
just
one
a way of
cannot
clarification. Yes, just a way of clarification. When you say the landlord cannot give the date as to when the tenant should leave the house. So who does that then?
Those are the rent officers in the court as well.
Okay.
Your notice is to prepare the person. My friend, I'm not interested to rent the place any longer.
What if your rent has expired? The agreement we have has expired. So
it has expired.
Naturally, if the contract we have has expired, you leave.
No, not necessarily that you leave. If your contract has expired, does it mean you can't pay your rent? If you can pay the rent, what is the essence of you giving me notice to quit? Unless, of course, you ask me to pay the rent and I say, no, my brother, I can't pay.
Okay.
And the law states when you defaulted payment within a month, that is the basis, one of the bases that a tenant can be ejected from a house. So without that kind of basis, what are you relying on? But
realistically, and I'll come to you before we activate the phone lines again. Realistically, if you are willing to renew a contract, you don't wait for it to expire before you start talking. You would have started talking before the expiration of the contract.
That is the realistic that you are talking about. But how many people actually know this kind of idea or have that kind of idea? But the point is, whether the landlords or the tenant, the parties, most of them doesn't know. They only wait until the date of expiring is due and say that you've never come to talk to me about whether you continue your tenancy or not. So when you approach and say, I'm even ready to pay. So your decision of ejection, why ejectment? That is my point.
Let me get to Lawyer Yaya here, because, if the contract is about to expire, you certainly would be having conversations about it. Why do we have to wait till the contract expires and then we say, okay, give him, you're not the one to eject him or say it's over, he has to go to the rent office?
Well, if you look at the way the law is structured, it doesn't foresee the circumstance where the tenant will leave. It just foresees the circumstance when the tenant's rent has lapsed. So they say that pay 6 months. It doesn't mean at the end of the 6 months leave. It just means that you should not be overburdened to pay more than the 6 months. If you have to pay arrears at all, either for your own convenience or for the landlord's or landlady's convenience. So at the end of the 6 months, so you have to continue to pay for the next 6 months, either month on month or another arrears for everybody's convenience. So that is why at the end of that 6 months, so that is why he said that at the end of that period, the intention is not for you to move out. Intention is to pay rent. So has the rent delayed? The rent has delayed. Is it more than 1 month? If it's more than 1 month, then you become a statutory tenant. But if at the end of the 1 month, or even at the end of the second month, you pay for the previous month, then you are back in business. So, but where you are definite that you sign a contract to say, I am staying here for 2 years. Now, that also doesn't mean that pay the 2 years in advance. It means that pay 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, pay another 6 months. And then by the 2 years, you need to, it's common sense to communicate to say, I will renew after 2 years or I will not renew. In most tenancy agreements, it is written that you have to serve notice. That notice will be given 3 months or notice will be given 1 month, so that everybody knows whether they are continuing or not.
Interesting. Before we activate the phone lines again, someone sent a message that says, called Emmanuel, he wants to find out. The one we're talking about, that you're living in a house and then after some time the landlord tells you, you know what, I want to give the house to another person or to my relation, so please move out of the house. He wants to find out if that's permissible.
In fact, this very issue we need to invite and investigate to tolerate. Why? Because people or landlords, some of them are fond of doing that. But the realistic is that, is it true? Is there any fact that the landlord have set people to accommodate? For instance, he said, no, I'm ejecting this tenant, reason being that I want to accommodate my employee. And we found out, is it true that he's working and somebody, our employees under him, and he's supposed to accommodate that kind of employee? All these things, when we find out and get that it's a true.
But if it is true, can it be done?
Can be done. It can be done.
In that case, how many months' notice are you supposed to be given?
In fact, when you read section 17J, it is there. The 17J, the rent at 220, you see it there, and it's supposed to be 3 months.
Okay. So 3 months' notice,
yes.
And then if it is the case. Yes. But how do you know it is the case?
That is why we call in to investigate the matter. We may call in even the witnesses to testify whether you are kind of person who give rooms to your people, or if your family member, as you are saying, is truly in need of the place. Then we have to know that how many people are you even taking care of. All these things have to be noted before we can pass judgment that it is true.
Okay, let's activate the phone lines for our last batch of calls on this particular issue. 0302216541 and then 0244340437. 0302216541 and then 0244340437. If you have any issues concerning rent, there's the time to give us a call so that we get Lawyer Yaya and the Chief Rent Control Officer, Chumampo, who's joined us in studio to actually address all these issues for you. But, before we get onto the phone lines, okay, we need to get onto the phone lines already. We'll come back and address other issues. Obusumuru from Domabeng, good morning. Hello, Obusumuru, good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Great. Go ahead. Yes.
Yes, my name is Ogunsunu from the Mabi. Please, my landlord, it wasn't a room, but he has a land, and he said we should build on it. We should put up a house on it, so that we will use whatever it will cost. Then I will stay in up to that years. So after the years, we were supposed to have an agreement again with the landlady, and unfortunately, the landlady died. Then the son of the landlady said, no, there was no agreement. He didn't know any agreement, so he will never let us stay in the house again. So in this case, what should we do, or what help can rent control give?
Now, did you have any written agreement? Did you sign any documents with her?
Yes.
You signed documents with your landlady?
Yes.
You have a copy of that document?
Yes, there was a copy down, but unfortunately there was some issue, and then we missed this in the document.
So the document is missing?
Yes.
There's no way of getting access to it?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, well, we'll get, Chumampofu and lawyer here to address those issues for you. Sarah in Hacho, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah. Please, I live at Hacho, and then I'm having a problem with my landlady. First, she doesn't allow me park my car in the house with no reasonable reason. She's just saying she won't allow me to park the car. Number two, after I moved into the house, she lives outside actually, so she comes yearly. After I moved into the house, I realized that the bath that I use is like the jacuzzi type. I realized that it's weak, so I was just bathing, and then I heard a crack when I was bathing in it. And I drew her attention after she returned this February. And she's telling me that I am the one who has to fix it. And I told her that the only thing I can do is to touch the cracked part. But she's telling me that I have to take off the whole bath and then get a medicine to fix it in such a way that it will be the normal bath that we all use in our homes, and it wouldn't be the jacuzzi type. I had the estimate, and it was almost 700 Ghana cedis. At least she can help of it.
Sorry, your line is getting bad. If you could kindly reposition yourself. And if you're driving, please do park so that we can hear you clearly, Sarah. Hello, Sarah? Oh, I think we've lost Sarah. Sorry about that. But let's get to Dan Suman. Martin, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, Martin.
Yeah, about 3 years ago, my mom actually had a property at Wija. And then there were this Nigerian family that were living in the house. They were paying 1,000 cedis a month. And then the husband died. The family, that's the husband died. And then we have to actually wait for about 6 months to collect the rent from the wife. By the time we realized the wife had made preparations to leave. And then we actually made a report to the police. I think that the DSP, who happened to be at the FCC police command, was actually made aware about this, and he made invitation to this wife to come. And then later on, the person said the matter was a civil matter, and therefore nothing could be done. Meanwhile, an attempt by us to have the address to which what the wife had moved proved futile. We were not able to get the address to even go into file a civil proceedings to recover the rent that was due. So clearly here, though we decided to act lawfully, the DSP at the time, whose name is DSP Adam, who I'm told now is a prosecutor with the courts, actually failed to make my mother to have access to that amount, which was about 6,000 Ghana cedis for the last 3 years. Despite all the attempt to have this money recovered, because that DSP has failed to furnish us with the information regarding where this wife had gone to be relocated, we've not been able to have that amount. So here we are saying that because we were law abiding and decided not to take the law into our own hands, what happened was that we have actually incurred a loss to the recovery of that amount. So here what I'm trying to say is that the police or the institutions of state have actually failed the nation, so that just in case you even try to act lawfully, there is some other miscreant who is there to ensure that your actions of being lawful becomes useless.
Okay.
So I think that they need to actually have a look at whatever they do there, so that people will always see the need to act lawfully in the event that something goes wrong. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Kwame Adashaliboche, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, Kwame.
Yes. When it comes to the rent issues, I think tenants are at all times at a disadvantage. I had a case where it was sent to the rent law. Mr. Chum Apofo there. I was surprised. He told me that if the landlord's son is coming and to the house, and at the time I was really in a difficult situation, and I couldn't have moved out as it were. So he, Chum Ampofo, said I should go and rent a place for my landlord's son to come in. And I was so shocked about it. Because in fact, eventually what happened was that the matter ended up in court. And you cannot believe it. My landlord brought the son to the court that he was coming to live in the house there. The judge didn't entertain it. He asked that he was not a party to the case, so he has to leave. Well, after I had left, the place was there for a very long time before it was rented to another person. After all, it was not his son who was going to occupy the place. So you see, as for rent issues, even the rent officer, Mr. Ampopo, he's not been helping tenants in most cases. And I had calls. The Minister for Works and Housing is my very good friend. And I even made a complaint to him. It appears as if he's very hostile to the tenants, most often. Even the morning I went there, you see he and a young lawyer who brought, I think, a tenant. They were hotly challenging each other. So that is the issue.
All right. Thank you very much, Kwame from Ashaliboche. Yaya in Tamale, good morning.
Thank you very much for the opportunity given me.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
In fact, tenant and landlord, they are just like family. But looking at issues somewhere, I'm going to set myself for example. I'm occupying a place where the place that belongs to my father. And there is one tenant there, which my father give him go ahead to do some renovation inside his room. My boss, who didn't take any notice of. By the time that we realized that he has finished everything, and my father asked him about the cost of everything. The term amount the money that he has mentioned for us, my boss, in fact, he can stay in the room more than 20 years, and then that money is sold for the landlord.
How much did he mention?
In fact, boss, he mentioned 3,000 plus.
How much does he pay a month?
A month he paid 20 Ghana cedis or so. Yeah,
20 Ghana cedis.
Yeah, 20 Ghana cedis. And then if you go to stay for master, so say tenants when they are with you and you don't take care of everything, it will tend you to become a fight or something all different together. And when you take them to the rent control, sometimes rent control in fact they are not following the procedures faster. In fact, they will call him to following month again. By the time you realize my boss. In fact, he will saying things unnecessarily again. I think, in fact, I think he's now in charge of everything.
Okay.
So, such tenants are something in terms of different. But we are not paying that landlords and tenants should be fight and someone should be shooting gun or something, or which every landlord should play for.
Thank you very much for joining us, Yaya from Tamale. Ba from Kufudia. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Yes, Ba. Go ahead and share your thoughts with us.
Yeah, I want to know from the officers, is it lawful for the landlord to be increasing rent every year? Is it lawful?
Okay. We'll ask that question for you. And Ba will be our last caller for now. Let's get answers to all your questions here on the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 with me, Winston Amoa. I still have Hanifa Yaya here, who's a legal practitioner, and Mr. Chumampofu, who's the Chief Rent Control Officer. So let's get into the questions, but I'd like to start off with you, lawyer, because Kwame has talked about an issue, a very important issue, where he says that tenants are at a disadvantage because, his landlord said his son was coming to live in the house. He went to rent control, met Mr. Chumampofu, who was here with us, and Mr. Chumampofu asked him to rent for his landlord's son. And he feels that, look, eventually, even when he left the house, the landlord didn't go, the landlord's son didn't live in the house. And so he feels that sometimes, the rent control office is also not dealing fairly with them. But I'll start off with you before I get to Mr. Chumampofu, because your name was mentioned. But
yes, I need to reiterate that the law provides certain circumstances under which the landlord can recover possession of his or her premises. For non-payment of rent for more than 1 month, the landlord can recover possession by going to court to get an order for eviction or by going to rent control. One of the circumstances under which a landlady or landlord can also recover possession of premises is for personal use. It is in the law. It's unfortunate that when the law is not on your side, anyone enforcing it looks like a bad person. It is indeed the law that if the landlord requires the premises for his or her personal use or that of their family, either for residential or business, commercial purposes, the landlord can recover possession. Mr. Ampofo did mention earlier the procedure that you would have to make sure. He says, because some of the landlords know that the law says one of the easiest ways to get rid of a tenant and recover possession is to say, I want it for my personal use. And it's very much abused. A lot of the time they will say personal use, but it's not personal use. How do you determine whether indeed it is for personal use? If it is for personal use, the landlady or landlord can recover possession by giving adequate notice to the tenant to quit.
Great. Let me bring you in at this point, Mr. Ampofo, because your name has been mentioned as telling him to go and rent house for the landlord's son. Yes.
Anyway, it's funny. Anyway, I don't quite remember this man, but I can say that my honorable minister is very fair on his position. I quite remember a case of such nature was brought before him, and he called me. He told me, go into the distance and use the art. That's what he told me. I quite remember. But this man's problem, in fact, there was rent arrears. 2, the place that he was living was too much for him. And he's saying that the landlord's son want to come in. So at the end of the day, the landlord was suggesting that forgo the rent. But according to the man, he said he want the place for some time because I don't know whether his children are schooling around or I don't know what happened. But he said he needs the place. Then the decision, if you need of the place and maybe you have a year for your children to complete school, what do I have to do? Either you just vacate or whatever money that you think you are owing, pay. Or better so, if you have any place smaller than where you are, put the landlord's son in.
When you say the place was too much for him, what do you mean?
For instance, being alone, renting about 4 rooms apartment, a whole house. When you listen to it, said a whole house, and perhaps you are paying about 1,000 cedis thereabouts. And when you defaulted payment within 6 months, have you realized what kind of money we are losing? So therefore, the landlord said, for me to accumulate or for you to accumulate rent to this extent, I prefer you forgo the rent. But meanwhile, you are not ready to go. So the other way around, if you need of the place and the son really is coming, get him a place, so that we can resolve the matter within our jurisdiction. But if you say no, we'll forward it to court. But at the end of the day, I think he said the court allowed him to say, but yes, sir, they will be giving you time to look for a place and move.
Yes, so he eventually moved and he said it took a longer time before the house
Maybe it depends on the nature of the premises. Does it need renovation? Does it need any repairs before the landlords move in? He didn't state the way he has or he left the house. He didn't state that. So it's rather unfortunate. I don't do things like that. But if really we put measures and we think that will be helpful, at times the law also gives us the right, section 3 of the Act, to use your discretion. So I'm not doing anything outside the
but the discretion should not be arbitrary.
Arbitrary, yes. But the point is, if you are in need, and you say, my son have to write an exam, we may need 1 year, and let's hope that the other landlord's son is in. He brought the son, according to him, he said he brought the son. So at the end of the day, what do? You can't move. So if the landlord is saying, forgo the rent, find out if you can rent one single room for the time being.
Okay.
And you said that is unfair. I don't.
So let's get to Yaya's case. And Yaya said his father had this property and gave go ahead, like he would say, to a tenant to do some renovations, and he will use his rent to offset it. Now this tenant pays 20 Ghana cedis a month. So we are looking at 240 Ghana cedis a year, and comes back to say he spent 3,000 Ghana cedis on the renovation. He says, how can this be the situation? Lawyer.
Well, the tenant says, I want to renovate, and landlord says, go ahead and renovate. If you give a blank check to somebody to go and sign, they will take all your money from your account if they are not reasonable people. So, first of all, the tenant needs to show receipts, what the tenant has done in the house. If the tenant is able to prove that indeed they did spend all that money on the room, then the parties will have to sit down and agree. Maybe they did something that is slightly beyond standard to suit the tenant's own comfort. Now, if you spend, for example, the room has a basic bathroom, and you come and you say you want a jacuzzi, and you renovate, pull out the landlord's basic tiled bathroom and fix the jacuzzi. The landlord is not obliged to pay for the jacuzzi, because the nature of the room is such that the jacuzzi suits only your taste, the tenant's own taste. And if you want that taste, you need to be able to pay for it. So, assuming everything we know is what actually happened, I believe that the people can sit down and look at exactly what went into the renovation.
Okay.
And if they can prove the payment, and if they can say that some of the things were beyond standard, and therefore the tenant should be able to bear some of that cost, and then the landlord will also bear some basic cost. In the future, it is important to sit down and agree on exactly what is being renovated and what is the estimated cost before you say renovate and use it in lieu of rent.
Talking about renovation, so Sarah calls and says, and she has a second question, which is about the jacuzzi being weak, had a crack in there. Now the landlady comes and wants her to fix it. It's going to cost her 700 Ghana cedis. She even wants the landlady to assist not doing so. And also she's not being allowed to park her car in the house. What will be your response to Sarah's issue?
Sarah's issue, Sarah doesn't tell us how long she's been using the jacuzzi before it broke. If she was using it for a year.
She said she felt when she started, she realized it was weak.
Well, that was the time she should have complained. Landlady, the jacuzzi is weak, change it. Otherwise, I won't take it. But once you take it and you use it and it breaks, I'm sorry, you have to fix it. I think the landlady is even being a bit reasonable by saying that fix it, not replace the jacuzzi.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure replacing the jacuzzi will cost her more. You know, if she says fix it, it's fair. If you break it, you have to fix it. Any state of any furniture or fitting that you find and you break it, you have to fix it. Now, I cannot understand why she will not be allowed to park the car in her house, inside the compound. Especially so when the landlady is not even resident in the house with her, or even within the jurisdiction.
She's come back now. The landlady came in February.
I cannot understand why she can't park. If maybe the landlady has her own cars which takes the space and there's no space, or other tenants are using the space and she came later and so she can't park, we would understand it. But unless there's more information, we don't know. But if it's strictly as she has said, it will be interesting to hear why the landlady is saying she shouldn't park.
Okay.
But otherwise, if you rent a house and you own a car and there's space in the house to park, I cannot see why not. You can park.
Mr. Chimampofu, I get you to say something about this, but also add Obusumu's case on, they built on the land and they were told that they would use the rent to offset it. Now, the landlady dies. He says the agreement that they had is missing. The landlady's son says, lie, this is not the case. We have no agreement. We can't do this.
Mr. Listen, he's saying that he has put in a building on a piece of land at his own cost.
Yes,
and
right.
Is to defray the cost as rent.
Okay.
The point is that when you given a chance or opportunity to put up a structure or whatever house in a piece of land, it should be in consent with the landlord in writing. So at the end of the day, you come out with your expenditure. Having put up that kind of premises doesn't mean you have to pronounce rent. That is one mistake that parties normally do. When you pronounce the rent, you say 20 cedis, and now at the completion of the structure, the amount involved may be almost 200 or 20,000. Now, how many years this 20,000 will be? So what we have to do is that to gather the receipts, that's the cost, and we'll just make sure parties are invited. Then we move into inspection and take dimensions of the place.
So in this case, in Obusumu's case, they do not have the written document, the contract.
That's it.
He says it is missing.
It is missing. So if
it is unavailable now.
Okay.
How do they prove? Let me get to lawyer this. How do they prove that he had a contract with a woman who's now dead?
Well, dead people don't talk, so they really have a problem. Because if you invest money in land to the extent that the caller is saying he did, he cannot lose the agreement that gives him the right to be on land. You take bare land, you build on it, you have an interest in that land, and therefore whatever the terms of that arrangement were should be available to prove that indeed this is the expenditure you have made. Now, that's the first part. The second part, I think he also mentioned that the time had lapsed. Now, if the time has lapsed, then he has to renew the terms. If now that the landlady or landlord has passed on,
landlady is passed on, yeah.
He will have to negotiate with the
one inherited,
either the personal representative or executor or administrator of the dead person's estate. And so he has to sit down with them and say, okay, we built this, we intended to live in it beyond this period, our time has lapsed, let's agree on terms so that we can continue.
Okay. Well, so I think that will be all, except that Martin talks about a property at Wager that a Nigerian family was renting 1 month and everything. Next week, we'll continue the conversation. My producer tells me that he'll give us a chance to actually continue this conversation next week. So we'll bring this particular question, to the conversation next week. Thank you very, very much. Mr. Chumampofu, for joining us this morning as we when we invited you. So it's good you've used the opportunity to actually educate Ghanaians. Next time we hope that you get more opportunity to educate Ghanaians. And thank you also, Hanifa, your managing partner at Here and Partners at Law, for also joining us this morning. We are very grateful to you all for joining us, make this conversation a lively and exciting one. So I'm on the Super Morning Show on Joy 99.7 with me, Winston Amoa. But coming up, should the restrictions on public gatherings be lifted by the President? What protocols or measures will be put in place in the churches, mosques, and etc. to ensure that faithfuls worship in a safe environment? Will these protocols be enough, or more would have to be done?